Hey guys, I'm Fowler. Today we're going to be taking a look at a very powerful tool that I use all the time to make sure my mixes and masters are sounding balanced. It's called FreqAnalyst Pro by BlueCats, and it's my favorite spectrum analyzer. Just a quick note, I'm not sponsored by BlueCats. I paid full price for this plugin years ago, and I think it's a great product, great value, and I think after this video you will too. So, let's go. Okay, here we are in FL Studio. We've got our trusty serum loaded up with a basic sine wave. And next to it, we can see the FreqAnalyst Pro. So this is a spectrum analyzer, and what that means is this graph is going to show us frequency on the x-axis. So this is low frequency bass stuff. This is high frequency treble stuff. And then it also shows us its relative amplitude. So if I play a note on the serum right now, okay, we can see that this sine wave is around, if you look up here in the position, it's around 150 hertz. It's about minus 26 decibels loud. We can turn it up, turn it down, play a different note. Okay, so now we see that it's just showing us the frequency that we're playing. So up here I've loaded a sample of white noise from audiocheck.net, which is a good resource. Let's take a listen and look at what it looks like on the graph. So what we're looking at is the instantaneous value. Let's start looking at the average instead. And what this does is it just averages it over time. In order to reset the average, we click the average button. So now we can see that white noise is equal frequencies across the whole spectrum. So 22 hertz is just as loud as 22,000 hertz. That's the definition of white noise. It's just random noise equally distributed across the spectrum. Now, one thing that people tend to aim for with a good sounding mix is what pink noise is. So let's take a listen to pink noise instead. So again, we're going to reset the average. So the difference between pink noise and white noise is that pink noise is equally distributed, but it's shifted down 3 dB for every octave. So every time you double the frequency, you drop the amplitude by 3 dB, which is actually the same as cutting the amplitude in half. And that's the definition of pink noise. White noise sounds bright. Pink noise sounds more natural to us because our ears are kind of tuned in a way that higher frequency sound contains more energy. It doesn't have to be as large amplitude-wise in order for it to sound as loud. That's why for a subwoofer, you need this big cone moving a lot of air for that low frequency. But for the high frequency, you just have this tiny little tweeter barely moving. 3 dB per octave is what sounds equal to us. I know it's kind of confusing, but stick with me. Say we have a sine wave at 1,000 hertz, okay, and it's this big. This is the amplitude, okay? Our ears will perceive that the same loudness as 2,000 hertz, so double the frequency, but it's half as big. It's only moving this much. Higher frequency just has more energy in it. Think about swinging a baseball bat back and forth, and you're moving it, like this. It takes a lot more work to move it like this. Physics. We're not going to go into that. So what does this mean for our mixdowns? Typically, I'll aim for a minus 3 dB per octave slope on my overall mixdown. Now that's not to say I need to make sure it's exactly 3 dB. It's just a good reference point. Some songs are brighter. Some maybe like a bass house, tech house kind of thing. Maybe it doesn't have a whole lot of energy in the high end except the hi-hats and stuff. So you got to keep that in mind. This is just a general rule of thumb. Let's take a look. Let's listen to the second drop from my song Hot. So you can see it's kind of the same slope, but this is why I love FreqAnalyst Pro over a lot of other spectrum analyzers. This knob right here, this slope, it allows us to tilt the whole graph one way or another. So instead of trying to gauge whether that's actually a 3 dB per octave slope, all I have to do is add 3 dB, and now we'll put it back in. So now we can see that because we've added 3 dB per octave on this slope, if the original slope going into it was negative 3 dB, we just shifted it up by plus 3 dB. So now we have 0 dB per octave, which is a flat line. And we can use these lines on the graph in order to judge whether it's a flat mix or not, okay? So you can tell this is pretty good. You know, maybe there's a little bit of energy that could have been added in the top end. That's probably just a decision I made. Again, we're not trying to go strictly for a 3 dB per octave slope. We're just using it as a reference. Now, let's muddy up the mix and take a look at what that would look like. I'm going to just add a big lump here and subtract a big lump there. I just purposely messed up the sound of this, right? I just made it muddy, pulled out some, and now we can see this weird kind of curve. And now you would be able to go and fix that, whether that's in the master, whether there's like an instrument that's really loud that's causing the sound to sound that way. Actually, let's leave that EQ. Let's try to fix it in the master. You know, let's add another EQ. Now, obviously, I'm going to be cheating a little because I know what that curve looks like, but okay, so you can see what kind of curve I had to add in order to, you know, it's just the opposite of this, obviously, and I wasn't perfect. So let's turn both of the EQs off. Let's check out another song. This is my song Freaky. We'll check out the drop from Freaky. Let's get... So again, you can see that the curve is roughly flat. You know, there's a bit of a dip here. I would trust your ears over I would trust this, but this is a good tool to double check your work sort of thing, right? Now I'm going to show you another interesting way to use this tool. So there's all kinds of other options over here. And one of the things is you're able to save these curves into different memory slots. So let's play Freaky again. I'm going to remember to click the average. Okay, so now I clicked the A button right here, which you can see if you hover over, it says store to A. So we just stored that curve as a red curve. Now we can reference that, right? So now we pull up the other song, Hot. We can store that in B. Now, you can see, I mean, I made both of these songs, and I am me. I didn't necessarily use this tool for both of those songs, but I honed my ear using this tool over years, and I still will use it as reference. It's kind of funny, actually, to see. I didn't expect them to be that close, but they're like, wow, that's close. That's consistent, right? Let's pull up another song. I pulled up a really old song of mine from years and years ago. I think this is like 2013 or something like that, all right? So let's take a look and see how my mixing was back then. I mean, really, that's pretty close. I haven't pre-checked any of these. I'm just kind of throwing them in there. So this seems to be what my ear likes, okay? This kind of curve. It's not to say it's the right curve, the best curve. It's just when I mix and master, this is kind of the curve I go for. It's relatively flat, relatively 3 dB per octave. And now a cool thing you can use this for too is say you really love a song by, I don't know, Skrillex or something, and you're not trying to copy his sound, but you're trying to do a little bit of investigation to see, okay, like what kind of curve does he have? Because I love the way that his bass and his, you know, the top and the bottom end, I love the way they work together, and I love what's going on in the mids, and you want to kind of learn from what he's doing. Well, load his song in and take a look at it and compare. Let's do that. All right, so I've loaded up the Feed Me remix of Silhouette by Bad Computer and Skyl. It's a great track. It's out on Monster Cat. You should definitely go check it out. I really love the mid-range of this track. The drop is like this sick electro drop. So let's just take a listen and look at it on the spectrum and compare it against Hot and Freaky. first of all, I should say this dip in the high end, that's because I downloaded the MP3, and that's just what happens with MP3s. That's how you save a lot of file size, is it lops off a bunch of the high end above, 20,000 hertz or so. This is interesting. This is telling me that the sounds, and it's not just the master, it's not just the mix, it could be the sound design, it's everything. It's the sound design, the mix, the master, everything contributes to this overall shape. So compared to my tracks, it's actually scooped out a little bit in the mids. Now, maybe I was having a problem with the mids in my track, the low mids in this kind of 300 to 500 hertz-ish range. Maybe I couldn't tell, oh, there's just something off. And I check out this song, which I'm like, oh man, I love the low mids. I love the way it sounds. It's so like deep and hi-fi sounding. So maybe I load it in here and I compare. Okay, so I stored it as C. Let's zoom in. If you look up here, I'm looking at around -16. He's looking at around -25, 26, 10 dB lower in that mid range, in that kind of area, and that's why it sounds scooped like that, right? So I'm not saying that you should use this tool to copy anybody, but I am saying you should use this tool to gather as much information as you can to train your ears to say, okay, I knew that sounded scooped and now I know why. And what I can do now is say I wanted to apply that same kind of sound to my track hot. Well, I could just scoop a little bit of those frequencies out. So let's load up a new EQ. I'm going to turn off the original curve, but I'm going to keep the silhouette curve here. So around 400 hertz, I'm gonna pull a little bit down. There's 4 dB. That's a pretty significant cut. Now you can kind of hear too, a lot of that sound, a lot of that frequency is the synth that's like wow, wow, wow. But this has allowed me to make an informed decision about my mix or master or sound design. Because again, there's no secret, like, you got to do this in your master, you got to do this in the mix. It's everything. You've got to start with the sounds you're choosing. If things are too bright, things are too muddy, maybe it's just a matter of investigating what is causing that. Maybe it's one instrument, maybe it's a bass, maybe your hi-hats aren't just loud enough. Maybe the hi-hats could come up and that would bring the high-end energy up. Or maybe everything is sounding good amplitude, but the master just needs a bit of a shift in the EQ or the way that you're doing your multi-band compression. At the end of the day, this is just an amazing tool with lots of other, there's all kinds of other options and stuff that I didn't get into, but this is a great tool to double check your work, do a sanity check, and more than anything, it allows you to train your ears to be like, oh, that sounds like too much 3000 hertz, because you can actually go and look and say, okay, 3000 hertz, there's a bump. Highly, highly recommend this. I'm sure you can do it with other products. I'm sure there's other spectrum analyzers, but this plus 3 dB per octave, that sets this apart from a lot of them for me. That's when I saw that this had that option, I was like, boom, instant buy. I hope you guys like this video. I love making this sort of stuff. I love sharing my thoughts on production. If you have any questions, some concerns, anything, let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to reply to you. And if you're not already subscribed, please consider doing so, because I'm going to try to upload 1 tutorial per week. And that's a soft commitment from me. So I'll see you in the next one.